Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke. I'm so glad you're here. This is my platform that is bringing you the most up-to-date, groundbreaking information from some of the best minds in the natural products industry, as well as some voices outside the industry too. All of them with great messages and tips and stories to share. If you like what we're doing and you love all the great messages and the stories, make sure that you take the time to like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. It's a little bit new than it was with radio for a long time, but that's what they want us to do. So I want to make sure that everybody has the availability of being able to do what we're doing and continue to make sure we're making all this information available to you. My guest today is Travis Lesperance. As you can see in the description of the program, you're going to really enjoy what we have to say today. So make sure you sit back, enjoy, and bring your friends because we don't want to miss any programs for anyone. Hey, Travis, how you doing?
Good, Dr. Burke. Good to be with you again.
Thank you so much. Hey, what's new in your world? You know, we've been through a lot of different things, and, you know, in this industry, we bounce around a little. And what's new?
Well, there's always something happening in the natural products industry. I know that for my part, I've been participating in this wonderful adventure for the last 2 decades now. I'm sort of a baby compared to many in our industry who have kind of paved the way before us, obviously. But recently I joined board with a wonderful brand called Great Naturally. It's really a founder-funded brand, a pioneering brand in the natural products space that's really just committed to the channel and wanting to focus on premium products, exclusive products, and I think most importantly, products that don't force brick and mortar independent stores to have to compete with larger chains or with e-tail and mass market. So it's really a pleasure to kind of move on to this next chapter. But it definitely is also addressing one of those areas that over the last couple of years has kind of come to the forefront of my mind. And I think that's part of what we're going to talk about today.
It sounds wonderful. Are you going to be back on the road again? You're going to be out there teaching and talking and training?
Yeah. You know, every once in a while I'll pull up the hotel app and I'll take a look at how many nights I've spent on the road over the last 12 years. And I don't recommend it to anybody, right? You hit those status levels and you get a little sense of like, oh, that's kind of neat. And then it just dawns on you of how much time you spend away. So yeah, I'll still be on the road and probably the best thing about traveling is being able to see all the wonderful independent stores, the mom and pop health shops, the smaller regional chains, and to really connect with not just the veterans who've been around for a while, but I've noticed more, especially over the last 5 years or so, maybe coming out of COVID, is that we have a kind of a new generation of lifeblood coming in the industry. And it's always great to, kind of introduce concepts that we take for granted. We're supposed to be the experts in the field, but to see those light bulb moments go off, that makes it all worth it. So I love traveling. I'll be out there with Great Naturally, but I'm also responsible for supply chain and product development. So get to do a lot of office work and spend time with family along the way.
To your point, I think what's interesting is that sometimes, I think people forget that we need to keep the spotlight on the brick and mortar and the mom and pop stores because they are the ones that built this industry. And I was part of it. I had stores 30, 40 years ago and, where we were the driving force. And today education is so important because the more educated people are, the more tools they have to work with, the more focused and, the vivid kind of in your hands information and tools you give them, the better they're going to do. And I like nothing better than being out on the road. I've won the gold medal in traveling too. So, and I'm continuing to secure that gold medal. I just got home last night. So, I love it. And I'm so glad you're out there because you have a great message to tell. So let's talk about the new gig. What's it all about and where are you focusing?
Well, I think we've all seen for the last couple of years kind of a rising trend, and that trend is really hydration. The category of hydration in natural food stores. It used to be kind of part of the sports set, and the sports set itself used to be kind of part of another set, right? So I think that just coming to understand and learn the critical need to maintain fluid intake. We've always been talking about water, but the way I look at it is, the science behind hydration really didn't get going until kind of the advent of things like Gatorade, right? Studying, not just fluid loss, but also mineral loss, electrolyte loss during sweating or high intensity exercise. And for many years, that just kind of became the standard of salt and sugar. And certainly I think we all grew up with a Gatorade bottle in our hand, which looks nothing like the original formula. It had to be made to taste good, I guess, for kids' palates. But as time went on, when I came in this industry, there really wasn't anything available that was a true alternative. People would ask for it, or if we had products at my health food store that were good for hydration. And we had maybe one or two brands. But then beyond that, really, I think we saw in the late 2000s this explosion in popularity around coconut water, right? And that kind of became like the alternative to a Gatorade or a Powerade. But I remember I was in school at the same time, and we had some professors that would focus on sports nutrition. And I remember they used to kind of bash a little bit on coconut water in saying that, yeah, it's good. It's got high amounts of other minerals, but it doesn't have a lot of sodium. So it's not really going to help with heavy sweat loss. And that kind of left our industry kind of in this position of not really knowing what to do. And really until I'd say the last 10 years or so, we started to see this new generation of products come around. And I think the big focus of them was twofold. Number one, recognizing that you do need more than just sodium. You certainly do need potassium. But then beyond that, recognizing that you need these minerals in like gram doses every single day. So I like to call the electrolyte minerals really the macro minerals, just because of how much you need. But as I was seeing this category really grow, and certainly looking back at experiences of working in the aisles and what customers would come in and ask for, and what we had and what we didn't have, my attention really started to turn to one mineral in particular, and that mineral was potassium. It's one that we all know, we've all heard of it. I'm sure if you asked an average person walking on the street, do you get enough potassium in your diet? And they'll say, well, I ate a banana today. Doesn't that have potassium in it? Right? That's the one. But then you look at how much potassium a banana has, and it's around 400, 450 milligrams if it's, a larger size. And then you look at how much potassium you need. And that's really where my jaw dropped. And I think that was the biggest reason why I wanted to join on this new adventure is really just focusing on a nutrient that I think is almost, it's not represented well in our space. It's almost like it doesn't exist at all. Because, when you see the amount of potassium that's required in the diet, it's 4.7 grams. And someone might think, well, okay, I mean, that's kind of like the other minerals. No, that's more than all other minerals combined, and we don't talk about it. So that was really one of the biggest focuses I wanted to really kind of move towards, is looking at probably the biggest mineral gap in the diet. We talk a lot about magnesium, we talk about iron, we talk about zinc. But just on the base of how much you need and how much people are getting, that's really where the journey kind of began, which led to joining on with Great Naturally and trying to formulate around that concept.
It's interesting because if you've ever been to an emergency room before, like in a triage area, the first thing they do with almost everyone that comes in is check them for dehydration.
Yes.
And everyone gets potassium, and they get a saline solution.
Yes.
Because the doctors will tell you that almost every person that comes in is deficient in potassium.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing the same thing with vitamin D as well. How many people are deficient. And but potassium is one of those things that, if you ask the average person about minerals, the first thing they'll say is, well, calcium. Yeah, I know calcium.
Right.
And to your point, magnesium or iron. But potassium, It's amazing how something so important is the one that's spoken about the least and remembered the least as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and as I've really researched I think there's a couple reasons for it. Really, the first one would be, just kind of getting a pulse on, how much do people get on average, right? So the recommendation, which is the adequate intake level, it's known as AI. There actually is no RDA established for potassium, and maybe we'll dive into why that is, because I think there's specific reasons. The average amount that someone walking around is getting every day is roughly about half that, getting about 2,500, 2,600 milligrams a day. And then really beyond that, you look at kind of study after study after study, it's pretty consistent. This is not just a problem in the United States. This is, according to the WHO, this is a global problem. The WHO says, you should probably get a minimum of about 3,400 milligrams before potassium is able to actually, induce the effects that it's responsible for on your system. And so this is like a widespread issue, so much so that, every 5 to 10 years, you'll see nutrition facts panels changing. And these are kind of nutrition policy, government policy driven. Potassium was the latest addition to all nutrient facts on foods. And it's because it's kind of listed as like the highest category of concern to the government before they start to look at things like fortifying into foods. And so, you do have calcium listed on that on every food. You'll see, you used to have vitamin A, they've removed that, they replaced it with potassium levels. But kind of digging into it a little further, one of the challenges with potassium is that potassium, it's hard to measure it by itself. All of the effects that potassium has on the system are in relation to the balance of other minerals, specifically sodium. So when you compare the amount of potassium people are getting, which is roughly half of the recommended amount, to the amount of sodium that people are consuming, which is roughly 50% more than is recommended, you create this enormous imbalance. And, when we were looking at something like hydration, or kind of a performance product to help people with getting fluids in their system, having those fluids go to work, I feel like in our industry, you could never miss the forest for the trees. If you're doing that, then maybe you're just kind of creating a trend that's not going to last. When I look at kind of just the overall mineral intake, that seems like it's a truly foundational area where people need help. And then going from kind of the universal concern to the particular need of, maybe getting a little extra sodium here, a little extra magnesium there. Minerals really don't work in isolation. They work in concert with each other. And so the goal of kind of trying to develop a formula was to, number one, bring that potassium level back into the right range. And then number two, having the other minerals come in the right balance to be able to have its overall effects on the system.
How do you feel? Is there across the board level that people need to maintain? Because there's a lot of circumstances that are going to cause differences, like if you're on a diuretic, if you're on a blood pressure medication, if you're on a low sodium diet.
Yes.
I mean, and if you're active, if you're not active, if you're younger, if you're older, children, where do you find the sweet spot there? And is there one?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a general consensus, and then there are particular circumstances. So, when you think about mineral needs, even from a young age, they're high, right? Calcium needs are there to build bones. Magnesium needs are there to balance the calcium and to have its electrolyte effects. Then from there, of course, sodium. Just kind of an overview. Sodium is that mineral that helps to pull the fluid into the system. But now it's outside of the cell, it's in the cardiovascular system. And so when sodium is out of balance, the biggest concern that comes is that it's going to raise blood pressure. And it's doing that simply by raising the volume of fluid that is in the cardiovascular system. Potassium is the main electrolyte inside the cell. So potassium needs to be there in order to take that fluid and pull it in, but more importantly, to kind of direct the entire cascade of how the body is going to manage fluids overall. Potassium is the governor of all the electrolytes that you have, and that has effects on not just the cardiovascular system, it has effects on the kidneys and the adrenals. As you know, the adrenals are not just there for stress hormones, they're mainly responsible for fluid balance hormones, right? Like aldosterone. And then even there, in terms of, what the kidneys are doing in maintaining fluid status, that plays a big role on whether your body is willing to get rid of calcium and magnesium or retain the calcium and magnesium. So that's just kind of the general function of how these electrolytes are operating when it comes to fluid. Then you get into how they're interacting with each other when it comes to muscles or heartbeat rhythm, or electrical activity in the nervous system. I mean, it's systemic, right? You need these minerals for all cellular exchange. So we all need them. We need them in high amounts, and we need them in high amounts because we get rid of them in really high amounts. That's the job of your kidneys. That's kind of the general kind of consensus, and that begins at an early age, and it's with you for the rest of your life. Typically it's weight based. If you have higher amount of lean muscle mass, then you typically need higher amounts of minerals to maintain that. It's kind of a no-brainer. But then you get into kind of disease states, like if you have kidney disease, this is an area where all minerals now need to be limited because your kidneys are not able to function properly. It's a broken system at that point. But what's interesting is when you look at just kind of overall kidney health and maintaining proper fluid balance, typically when the minerals are out of balance for so long, that absolutely contributes towards the health of the kidneys kind of going downhill over time. And it's just simply because they're being overworked, or you're basically not getting that oil change every single day with the proper balance of those minerals coming in the system. So the one scenario I would say where you can kind of get away with going out of balance, particularly with sodium and potassium, because they work together. It's kind of a yin and yang relationship. And that would be if you're going on like marathons, or if you're hiking Mount Everest, you're engaged in like super high intense exercise, you're a professional athlete, then you are going to be losing a little bit more sodium outside of the kidneys and the bladder. You're going to be losing it through sweat. But for the average person who's exercising, 3 to 4 times a week, they're going to the gym, it's lifestyle focused, they're just trying to maintain proper hydration. Really, your main concern is making sure you're hitting the right doses. And then beyond that, making sure that those doses are in the right balance with each other.
A lot of people, we keep getting told to make sure we're drinking a lot of water. I was luckily raised in a household where every meal, my mother it's funny now, my mother used to say, "What would you like to drink, water or water?"
Yeah,
And that's what we got. So now today people are drinking a lot of water, but drinking a lot of water, although it does add moisture to the body, sometimes we need to secure and make sure that water is wetter, if you will, and does what we need. So this is even more important for the people that are drinking a lot of water.
Yeah. And it goes well beyond just fluids. I remember back in the 2000s, right, when the pH diets or the alkaline diets were all the rage, and you had the books Alkalize or Die, right? And then you had your list of foods that were foods that were more alkalizing or more acidifying. And people can have a whole range of opinions on just the veracity of the arguments that they claimed, but when you really boil it down into what is it that is ultimately buffering the alkalinity of your system, it's minerals. Minerals are what's doing that job. They're alkaline by nature, and the number one nutrient that is responsible for buffering systemic pH is going to be that potassium load that's coming in the system. And so when you bring in water just by itself, first of all, it was impossible to do outside of kind of modern technology with distillation or reverse osmosis. If you were to get a historical source of water, let's say from like a spring or a natural well, those would always be carrying a notable amount of minerals. I remember seeing a study one time that was looking at kind of the southern U.S. because they typically have, on average, higher blood pressure than the rest of the country. And one of the things they were saying was, yes, there's too much salt in your diet and your food, the processed foods are too high. But they were also noting that the natural water sources in the Southeast typically have a lot more sodium naturally present. And so the reason why I'm saying that is because the probably the biggest takeaway I took from that study was mainly that roughly 15 to 20% of your daily mineral need historically has come from just getting your water intake. And it was just carrying the calcium, the mag, the hard water, but also some sodium, and then potassium was left to the foods that you were getting in your diet.
I was raised in the country on well water.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because the kids in our neighborhood, and this was very odd, none of the kids in our neighborhood had acne
Ah, yeah.
growing up, and they would bus us into the
Right.
city, and all the kids in the city that were drinking city water had
Yeah.
all these acne problems,
Mhm.
and none of the kids in our neighborhood, and the only thing they could figure out was it was the water,
Yeah.
because there was nothing else. We were eating the same foods as they were, shopping at the same stores, but
Yep.
the only difference was we all had minerals from our wells, and well water was all we had.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny because our whole childhood, no one in our neighborhood ever had the acne problem. So
That's
nice.
something. That's something I've experienced too. This is actually going back about 7 or 8 years, where I started to recognize, I don't want to drink tap water, so I got an RO system and I installed that. And if anybody's ever drank straight RO water, I mean, it really saps the moisture from your mouth, which is, like you said, it's counterintuitive, right? So I began mineralizing that water. And finding ways to get more magnesium at the time, a little bit more calcium, a little pinch there, and then I started adding the potassium in. But now I live up in northern Arizona. We're on well water now, and apart from getting it tested to make sure it's safe, the thing I love about it the most is I know that it's hard water, and it's going to be contributing some of those minerals. But that's also the thing I hate about it the most, because now you get the scale that's building up in the pipes and whatnot. But all this is really just to say that this has been a huge concern of mine for a long time. And I remember working in my health food stores, and customers would come in, and specifically potassium, right? Because we've seen the rise of magnesium over the last 20 years. And in my mind, one of the biggest reasons why magnesium had to do this rise was to counteract the promotion of calcium supplements in the 80s that were just by themselves. We don't want calcium going into soft tissues. It needs to be in balance with other minerals and nutrients to direct calcium and keep it in check. So magnesium does a great job of that. And we're still struggling. There's about a 200 milligram gap in our requirements for magnesium. But then you move over to kind of the bigger issue in my mind, which is the sodium to potassium ratio. And so customers would come in and they had been to the doctor, and the doctor is telling them, hey, I need to get more potassium, or at least minimally, I need to get my potassium back into the right intake levels to do its job of maintaining, proper blood pressure, or at least balancing out the sodium that's there. And so I'd bring them over to the little bottles, and I think we've all seen them. It's 99 milligrams of potassium chloride.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be looking at this paper from their practitioner, and they're like, well, I'm being told I need 1,000 milligrams. Are you seriously telling me I need to eat 10 of these things every single day? And it was like, well, that was our option. And then as time went by, one thing I think is funny about us in health food stores is that we kind of become the experts of the whole store. If we work just in supplements, that means we understand food and nutrition. And so the grocery folks will come over, sometimes the dairy or bulk or frozen or produce, and they'll pull you over to the customer they're helping, and they'll say, can you explain, this, what they're asking about, when it comes to this food, or what this ingredient is? And so I started to learn that, you go into the baking section, and, you can find like salt alternatives. And that was really the only way where people, because they switch out the sodium for potassium in those products. And that was the only way that I could offer some sort of solution to a customer to give them a much higher amount of potassium, which was absolutely necessary in light of, just the lack of options that were there on the shelf. But there's reasons why that 99 milligram rule is kind of there. It's not a true like FDA rule. It's not a legal thing. It's more so just the reality that when you deal with things like potassium chloride, the chloride itself is what can be irritating or damaging to the stomach. It's very acidic, obviously. And when you put that into a tablet, then now it's sitting on a very small space along the stomach lining. And that's actually what can, spur on things like stomach ulcers, actually. So for a long time, potassium, I think just kind of everybody just looked at it and they said, well, there's nothing really we can do because, we can't make a big old giant tablet that has a large amount of potassium in it. But as time went on, we started to see the rise of new formats. People are looking, sometimes they get tired of capsules and tablets. There's time and place. When you want a big dose in a small space, do a capsule for sure. But oftentimes people are looking for that experience. They want something they can taste. They want something they can mix. And in the category of hydration, it's a no-brainer, right? Because you need the fluids anyways So being able to put it in solution really makes potassium kind of it's the perfect delivery system, and it mimics what we've been doing for a long time with coconut water or celery juice powder. All the juices that are out there. Probably the main reason why you would want any juice at all, especially if it's a low sugar juice, is not just the antioxidants, it's the mineral load that it's going to deliver along the way. So I think we're at a point in time where people have options now, but the question is, are they making options that are good for their lifestyle, or are they making options that are kind of focused a little bit more on kind of the trendy stuff of what we're seeing in the hydration category today?
Do you remember when they had like the potassium gluconates?
Yes.
And it would say 590 milligrams of potassium gluconate, but on the back it would say yielding 99 milligrams.
Yep.
And people would go by the front label. They're like, well, I'm getting 600 milligrams. No,
No.
you're not.
Yeah. And you got to be smart about it, and that's the one thing when it comes to, like, especially like I said, with potassium, it's just really not represented. So, just by the numbers, just so people understand, you drink a single can of coconut water, you're getting 800 to 1,000 milligrams of potassium. You eat a single baked potato, you're getting roughly the same amount. You eat whole foods, minimally processed foods. Those are giving you giant chunks of potassium at a time. That's how the body is expecting to receive that mineral. And that's the only way you could really add that up over a 24-hour period to get to that 4.7 gram dose. And so this is correlating also with decades of research. Many of us are familiar with the DASH diet, right? Which was a diet that was designed for those with hypertension. And probably the biggest kind of recommendations that came out of that was, number one, get the junk out of your diet, right? Stop eating processed junk. But then beyond that, there was really kind of two findings. And then from those two findings, government policy had to figure out, well, what's the one that's most likely for people to follow. The two findings were, number one, get sodium out. You're over consuming sodium. And so they dropped down the recommendation to 1,500 milligrams a day from the 2,300 milligram mark for healthy individuals. And then number two, that's where they developed that 4.7 gram recommendation, and it held for a long time after that. So they looked at those two concerns and they said, we know people are over consuming sodium, and then they don't have the mineral needed to balance it out in the system. Because even Dr. Rhonda Patrick, she had a newsletter recently. She's basically kind of describing the fact that as long as potassium is high enough in the system, typically a 2-to-1 ratio with sodium's effects on the cardiovascular system are neutralized. It's really just a ratio problem, not so much a dosage problem. But that's what the DASH diet found, was that people were getting 4.7 grams or easily more if they're eating enough whole foods in their diet. And so then government policy had to look at it and say, well, how can we kind of affect change in the population? We could either tell people to eat less sodium, which may be easier to do, just don't eat as much processed food. Or we can tell people to get more potassium, which is much harder to do, because now you're telling people to actually eat whole foods, right? And spend more time on food preparation, or you're spending more money on food because it's fresher. So that's been the direction over the last couple of decades, is how do we deal with this issue? We're not going to talk about the potassium, because how do you address it? We're going to talk about getting sodium out of the diet. And I think that's, unfortunately, it led to sodium kind of becoming the boogeyman. And that's not fair, because sodium is incredibly important and it's really functional, especially for things like exercise. But I think either way, all of this really missed the point, which is that sodium is not good or bad. It's only in relation to everything else that's coming in the diet. And I think that's what we've been preaching forever, is we need balance, we need density, and we need consistency in the foods that we're eating.
I have a friend, and she's a triathlete, and she was having problems with her potassium levels, and she had gone in to see, it was an Ayurvedic practitioner while she was in India. And he put her on 4 coconut waters a day.
Good.
She eats a baked potato or a yam with every meal. She eats dark green vegetables, and then she takes a potassium electrolyte powder, but also trace minerals as well.
Wonderful.
And her levels are amazing. She said her performance, her recovery, her brain, her muscles, everything got so much better, because she had so much sodium in her system. And when she sat down and actually started calculating everything, she said, I couldn't believe the amount. She said, and to your point, she said, sodium is not the bad guy here.
Yeah.
The bad guy is the amount of it that I have and the little bit of potassium I had.
Yeah.
And so she got smart, and she now teaches other runners how to do this.
And I think that's especially what we've seen over the last 10 years, really, with the rise of this hydration category. People are looking for more hydration or electrolyte products. And I think the one thing that most of us are pretty much getting right is that recognizing we need these minerals in high doses, right? But then, like I said, really the challenge comes in with the balance of it all, right? Because what is your body going to do with these minerals once they're in the system? And so that's really what we wanted to focus on, is just recognizing that, number one, every cell of your body requires these minerals in order to function properly. On an organ-wide level, a system-wide level, they need them in balance in order to function properly. And the three systems that are really benefited the most from proper mineral intake are, number one is going to be cardiovascular system. So blood pressure is largely managed by the relationship between sodium and potassium. Number two is the electrical gradient of these muscles actually firing properly. And that's where we see not just sodium, potassium, but also magnesium really come into play, especially for kind of heart healthy function. Then from there, like I said, the kidneys. And especially I was digging into the adrenals the other day, and mushrooms are so popular and they're so effective, and there's so many herbs that are around now that are kind of dealing with kind of the cortisol or the stress spikes that we get from just our daily life and modern living, but also too, we see a ton of crossover with imbalance of minerals. And what you're essentially doing is you're putting your kidneys and your adrenals, you're putting them on tilt constantly to fight against this system that's there. And so let's say you bring in a high dose of sodium, and you think, I need more fluids. So you're going to do kind of like what I call a salt bomb, 500 milligrams or more of sodium in one go. And if it's not in balance with the other minerals, the kidneys and the adrenals are immediately going to move into action to get that extra salt out. It did a good job of pulling fluids in, but your body does not have the ability to handle it once it's there. And so now, as it's dumping that excess sodium and fluids out, what is it doing? It's pulling calcium. It's pulling magnesium, because once again, even at the rate of filtration in the kidneys, there has to be an equal equation across the board. So your body is fighting for balance at all times when it comes to mineral intake. And if potassium's not there to push the to push the calcium back in the system and allow the sodium to go, now you're pulling that calcium over the course of time from things like bone density, right? So we see these population-wide studies over and over and over. And I think it's almost, I'm at a point, Jeff, where it's almost criminal that potassium has really kind of been the unsung hero for so long, and it really just has not been addressed. And so that's exactly kind of what we wanted to focus on going into developing formulas at Great Naturally, was recognizing that it's not just about pulling fluids in the system. It's about telling them where to go. It's about allowing these systems to function properly. And one of the biggest areas where we also see it is the nervous system. Right? You have your neurotransmitter balance, but once again, those neurotransmitters are there to respond to what's happening, to keep you in check in a mental state. And when that mineral status is just simply not in the proper order, you're just constantly fighting against a system that can never be addressed until they come back into that proper ratio.
So talk to me about products you have available that people can pick up at really, good, high quality health food stores. And what's available? Let's see it.
Yeah. So when we first launched, we developed three flavors of what we call the Hydration Plus. The line is known as Real Electrolytes. And pure and simple, this is a natural product. So the formula is built on a base of food. It's actually the number one ingredient in the formula, even though it has high doses of minerals that are also added. But that base is going to be coconut water powder, celery juice powder, and cucumber juice powder. We did that on purpose. Those are like the highest mineral juices, while also having the lower amounts of sugar, because we didn't want this to be a high sugar formula. So we developed a lemon lime, of course, classic, kind of hydration flavor. We have a strawberry lemonade, and we have a watermelon as well. But then from there, we built on that food. That's the base. And what we chose was what we felt were the highest quality forms of minerals to, number one, assist with absorption. So we include 800 milligrams of potassium citrate, which is probably the most tolerable form of potassium. It's kind of a food form, as it were, of how you'd find it in a food. Then beyond that, potassium citrate has a lot of cool other functions to it in terms of how it's working on things like the kidney. So it's a great form overall. We also include 200 milligrams of sodium because, once again, sodium is fantastic so long as it's kept in balance. And we chose Himalayan pink salt for that to get some trace minerals along the way.
Nice.
Then from there, we have 125 milligrams of magnesium because that's another huge gap. But one of the problems that I've seen is that, especially with hydration products is, I travel a lot, you travel a lot. Whenever I would look for something for, hydration, you want something with big doses. But magnesium is the one you have to be careful about, right? If you get the wrong magnesium or too high of a dose and you're sensitive, it's going to do the opposite of hydrating you. It's going to dehydrate you, right? It's going to run right through. So we chose magnesium chelate because it's easily the most absorbable. It's well tolerated, doesn't cause stomach upset, and it's not pulling water into the colon to get out of your system along the way. So to finish it off, we have a little bit of calcium ascorbate, so you get some vitamin C along with it. But that's the base formula. So you're getting over 1,500 milligrams of total electrolytes, and that is what's guaranteed. We're not even measuring or we're not putting on the label what you get from the food, even though we have C of A's that show us you get a considerable amount additionally with every serving. It's less than a gram of sugar. We use a blend of stevia and monk fruit because we know not everybody's a stevia fan, but having that monk fruit in there really balances it out. And ultimately, it's natural colors, no artificial sweeteners, no artificial ingredients. It's non-GMO. It's a very clean product, but that is the base, Hydration Plus. Then from there, we built two lines, which we call kind of our structure function lines. And one of them is called Focus Plus, and another one is called Relax Plus. And really what we did was we looked at what are the times of the day where you need the most support when it comes to hydration. Certainly getting out of exercise or going into exercise, middle of the day activity, that's a way to kind of catch up and top off. But if you can get a jump start, or if you can kind of preempt your ability to recover at the end of the day, that's an area where we felt, you need that big mineral punch to really kind of recharge the battery, soak up the sponge. And so with our focus formula, we have the entirety of what's found in Hydration Plus, but then we added 250 milligrams of citicoline. And we could have spent this whole hour talking about citicoline, but pure and simple, it is a brain-ready form of choline that assists in the building of neurotransmitters, assists in the building of neuron tissue cell membranes. And it's something that I have personally been positively affected by. I'm a choline hound, and that's something that I've always looked for. And so I thought, if I ever made a product, or if I ever, was assisting in helping with a brand, choline is what I would want to see in there for the brain. A perfect complement to the herbs, to the mushrooms, right? You're getting kind of the hard nutrients, and then you're able to bring in those herbs on top, and they work really well together. So we have that in orange and pineapple, perfect breakfast flavors. And then nice. To finish it off, we developed what's called Relax Plus. And so once again, the brand is really built around how do we find and fill true gaps in the diet. And probably another huge gap that we found was glycine. Glycine is an amino acid. Glycine is found in all proteins. It's found in really high amounts in collagen. And over the years, I noticed there was folks who, they would tell me, because I've represented brands that have collagen in their lineup and good quality collagen, but they would tell me, I always take my collagen at night, or I try to avoid taking my collagen until the evening because I find that it really relaxes me and I get really good sleep. And I always wondered, that's kind of strange. That's like the folks who would say, I put my fish oil in the freezer because then I don't get burp up. And you look at the science of it, you're like, I don't see how that works. And yet you hear it across the board. It does work. So the more I looked into it, the more I realized, it's the glycine. Glycine is a neurotransmitter that you use that helps to kind of relax you, bring you down, and especially for people who are what I call over methylators, right? The wired and tired folks. Glycine is one of those nutrients. That's you, yeah. There you go. So we put 3 grams of glycine in there, which is about as much as you get from a scoop of collagen. And then to finish it up, of course, kind of the age-old favorites of theanine and lemon balm to really kind of coat and protect the nervous system and allow it to actually relax. So all of this was developed, number one, to get your mineral intake back in the right doses, to get it, more importantly, back in the right balance. And then from there, do it in a clean way that's really exclusive to the natural channel and natural products, independent stores, with clinically studied doses of other ingredients that really complement the action of those minerals.
And also in an absorbable way that you can
Absolutely.
feel. Not only do you get to feel it, but you know in your mind that you're getting it to where it needs to go.
Yeah.
And I love it, because we're trying to get people to drink more water today.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to remember that people are sugar tasting, sweet tasting
Yeah.
hounds.
Yeah.
They things have got, if it doesn't taste sweet. I was at the pharmacy about a year ago, and the lady in front of me was picking up her medicines for her kids, and she's picking them up, and the pharmacist said bubblegum, watermelon, or strawberry.
That's right.
And she said, what do you mean? He goes, the flavoring. And she goes, well, do I have to add that? And he goes, they like it. That's what makes them do it. And I think to myself, it's about flavor.
Yeah.
So how are these? Are they good? They have a really good taste?
I think they're awesome. Of course, I'm biased as the product developer, but no, we developed one of the things that I noticed about these is that, I remember as a kid, right? Because I was a regular kid growing up. We had the pitcher of Kool-Aid in the fridge. And I always remember like wanting to get that Kool-Aid before it was done. And my mom's got her arm and she's pushing me away. Wait till I get it all done. And I remember tasting it one time before she added the sugar, right? And of course, it doesn't taste as good without all that sugar in it. But the thing that I remember the most was how thin it was. It just didn't have a mouth feel to it. Like there was no substance to it. And I think with a lot of hydration products today, if the potencies of those minerals are just not high enough, there's no substance to it. Or if you add too much water, which is the goal of the product, is to get you to get more fluids in, the flavor just drops off a cliff, right? And then next to that, many of the hydration products today are kind of in that salt bomb category. So you know what you're getting. You're getting pickle juice, right? When you drink it, it's all salt, and it's just confirming that, yes, I need more salt right now. That's what I'm trying to go for. We try to come at it a different way. We try to come at it to try to mimic what you would get from things like coconut water. When you drink a can of coconut water, you feel it. There's a confirmation to it of that density of that fluid. And so we wanted to formulate it in a way that you could add a significantly amount more liquid to it, and that flavor will carry, so you can really kind of find what the amount that you like is. So we say on all the bottles, 12 plus ounces of water. Cold water is always best. And for some people, they want it to be super strong, so they'll go 12 ounces. But for us, I drink it in 24, sometimes 36. I'll get my big giant, kind of Stanley cup or whatever, and get a scoop in there. I want the fluids. And so I love it at about, 3 or more cups of water. And then I can drink it throughout the day. And the flavor carries. And that was really the goal of the formula, was to have it look good with natural colors. We use things like beet powder. We use turmeric powder, spirulina, all these things to provide that wonderful color. You don't have to go with the synthetic stuff. But then when it comes to that flavor, we really wanted it to carry. And so people are able to actually, they're encouraged to get more fluids.
So let me ask you a question. Someone's standing in the store and they're looking at the 3 formulas and they're like, I need all these.
Yeah.
Can you do more than one, or do you have to choose?
Yeah, you can. When you look at the doses and just keep in mind, everything I've said today in regards to kind of health claims or whatnot, all of these are in relation to what is the average person getting in their diet, what is recommended that they get in their diet, and what are the health effects if people are simply, if humans are simply being human, right? That is the goal of the products, is to fill those huge gaps that are there. So, nothing is new here. But with that being said, we people can do 2 to 3 servings a day. We find that a lot of customers, they'll do one in the morning, and then they might try the Focus and have that be the one that they take in the morning. And then they'll just get the regular Hydration Plus for the afternoon. We have it in tubs. We have it now in stick packs that are available, single serving for people who are on the go. Toss it in your backpack, toss it, in your carry-on. And there's really no issues, because ultimately the goal is, how big is the gap I'm getting? In our minds, 2 servings will give you an extra 1,600 milligrams of potassium, 250 milligrams of magnesium. Boom. You've checked the list off. you don't need to worry about whether or not you're getting enough minerals overall. And quite frankly, you might be able to kick out a product that you've been taking for a while, but you're tired of swallowing that capsule and you'd rather get it all in a single formula. So yeah, by all means, if you take focus in the morning, hydration in the afternoon, hydration in the morning, relax at night, 2 servings is kind of that sweet spot. And you really don't need much beyond that.
Well, I think it's wonderful. Now this is available now. It's
Yes.
out there. I'm seeing the post all over social media. I see you guys are out there. Mom and pop stores, it's available. And give everybody the name of the product again and the 3 names of the individual products.
This is going to be Great Naturally. We have a line of hydration products called Real Electrolytes. The base formula is called Hydration Plus. It's available in 3 flavors. We have the Focus Plus formula to really kind of get you going in the morning with a little bit of caffeine as well from green tea. And we have 2 flavors available for that, as well as the Focus Plus, which has, in my opinion, the best flavor, hibiscus lemonade, wonderful kind of lemony floral flavor to it, as well as cherry limeade. But they are available in brick and mortar health food stores. We also have them available on our website, greatnaturally.com. So I would definitely encourage you to check them out. Even if you're someone who has taken other electrolyte products before, I would highly encourage you to try something that might be a little bit more balanced. And ultimately, it's going to give you hydration. We like to say it's not just going to get you hydrated. It's going to keep you hydrated, which is the ultimate goal on a day-to-day basis.
I hope you guys enjoyed this today. My guest today, Travis Lesperance. We've been chatting about amazing things about potassium and electrolytes. This is something that we should share the show with your friends and make sure that they get the time to tune in. Make sure to go to my webpage, drjeffreyburke.com, tap on the Honest Health logo. It looks just like this. Make sure that you take it over to Spotify, listen to the audio, or even better, go to the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe, watch the videos. And Travis, before we go today, first of all, will you come back and see me again?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And number 2, thought for the day.
Follow your passion. Sometimes you have to take a little bit of risk, but ultimately, if you're doing what you love, then it's worth it at the end of the day with the sacrifice that goes into it. So I love this industry. You love this industry. We wouldn't rather be anywhere else. But hopefully you can benefit from our wisdom. And then as you follow your passion, we can benefit from yours and we all grow together. So
I love it. Thank you. Everybody have a great day. Thank you for being here and God bless.
Awesome.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.